I often talk about learning English and the strategies I adopted to become fluent. Even though sharing my personal experience is definitely helpful, I also understand that the landscape nowadays is a bit different. Some things have changed since I started learning English 24 years ago. So I thought that it would be a great idea for me to come here and share with you what I would do today if I had to learn English from scratch. It's going to be a great episode, so let's get started. Hey there, how's it going? Thiago here, and welcome to another episode of the podcast. Happy New Year. This is precisely the first video, the first episode of 2025 here on the channel. I didn't post any videos, any content the past 2 weeks, because I was on vacation. I really needed a break. Last year, 2024 for me was quite eventful, I would say. Let's put it that way. So, by December, I was toast. So I really needed to, disconnect, take a break. So that's what I did. It was great to spend the holidays with my family. My parents were visiting for a little while, which was great. And then I spent about 2 weeks at the beach, and I even got a little bit of a tan, as you might be able to see here. But now I'm back, and it's time to officially kick off 2025 here on the channel and with the content for this year. Okay. I missed you guys. I missed creating content here on YouTube, but now I'm back and let's get started. Before I go over the topic here, I want to invite you to join my private community because, this is a community where you get to meet other people who are also English learners. You get to share things you're learning there, your struggles. The members of the community organize live meetups among themselves every month. So you also have the chance to join live calls with other members of the community to practice your speaking skills. Everything happens under my supervision. And by becoming a member of the community, you also have access to some really cool benefits and perks like exclusive content, one live Q&A with me every month, and many other things. So first of all, I want to invite you to check out the private community. I think it can be a great resource for you in your English learning now in 2025. And also check out my pronunciation course. I created this course to teach you the main sounds of the English language and the main connected speech patterns that you hear native speakers using in media, in real life. Knowing this will help you speak English with more clarity, better fluency and flow, and will also improve your listening skills. You'll be better able to understand fast English when you watch movies, TV series, podcasts. So all the links are here in the description of the video, in the pinned comment below, and also in the show notes if you are on Spotify. Okay, but do check it out. Check out the private community and the pronunciation course. I'm sure these can be great resources for your English now getting into 2025. Okay, so I wanted to start with this topic. Start the year with this topic because we are in January, and I thought that taking into account the technology that we have available nowadays, and also my experience, because it's been over 20 years that I've been an English learner and teacher, I wanted to share with you what I would do today if I had to learn English from scratch. Okay. So the first thing I would do is first, I would assess how much time I would be able to spend learning English every day. I would assess my current life circumstances and commitments, what my life looks like nowadays, because, depending on which season of your life you find yourself in, you might have certain arrangements and commitments that another person doesn't. So first, I would take a look at my life currently, my arrangements, commitments, responsibilities. And then after doing that, I would come up with a realistic amount of time I would spend daily for English learning. I really believe that you should be practicing your English daily, even if it's just for 5 minutes, 5, 10 minutes, but do it daily. It's that little moment, that moment in your day that you do something with English. So I think this is really powerful. Also, I would focus on making the process sustainable for me. I wouldn't be particularly worried about finding the perfect strategy to learn English, finding the perfect method, because I really believe that there isn't such a thing. There isn't the perfect strategy, the perfect method, you know? And I would focus more on doing a few things, but doing them very well, than maybe trying to learn hacks or uh, going after information. I would really apply the 10% strategy, 90% execution principle. This is a common principle in business. The 10% strategy and 90% execution states that a well executed average strategy will outperform, will do better than a poorly executed superior business strategy. So it's a common principle in business, but we can also apply it here to language learning. Instead of trying to find the perfect strategy, the best methods, I would focus on doing a handful of things, yeah, but doing them very well. I would focus on the execution. Okay. So that's the first thing I would do. Make it sustainable, applying the 10% strategy, 90% execution principle, and coming up with a realistic amount of time I could dedicate daily for my English practice and English studies. Okay. After doing that, then I would start actually getting to work, getting my hands dirty. So the second thing I would do, once I define that, is I would start with input. I would start with input because, if you know nothing about the language, or if you know very little about the language, I believe it doesn't make much sense to focus on producing language right away because you don't have a lot of baggage in the language yet. If you are a beginner, or if you haven't been studying for a long time, yeah, you've just started. So I would focus first on getting some input. It doesn't have to be anything long. For the first months, let's say, for the first months, maybe the first 6 months, I would just focus more on input. And what do I mean by input? Consuming language, consuming information. I wouldn't worry about speaking it. I wouldn't worry about writing, producing something with it. So I did this when I learned English many years ago, and I would still do it. This is something that I wouldn't change. First, I would get a grammar book. I would get a grammar book because, that would allow me to learn how the language is structured. And I could even start doing a little bit of writing practice by copying the information in the book into a notebook. Um, the great thing about grammar books, I think, is that they are quite visual. There are images, they're colorful. And if you pick a beginner grammar book, you know, even though they explain things in English, the language they use to explain the structure is very simple, very straightforward. So it's possible to follow. Yeah. So I would open the book to Unit 1 and then study that structure that Unit 1 is teaching. Check out the example sentences. I would copy some of those example sentences into my notebook for personal notes. And then I would go to the next page and do the exercises about that topic to practice. After doing that, I would check the back of the book for the answers and see how well I did, how many questions I got correctly, how many questions I got wrong. And if I got something wrong, I would double check that and understand why I made that mistake. You see? And that's it. Then the next day, I do the same thing with Unit 2. And then the next day with Unit 3, like that. This is great because, you are already practicing a little bit of reading in English because you are reading the book, you are reading the explanations there, the sentences, and you get to practice a little bit of the writing as well if you are copying some sentences, you know? Not to mention that you are learning grammar. You are studying the grammar, so you are having an idea of how the English language is structured. But of course, this is not enough. So in combination with that, for input, I would also listen to authentic material. When I say authentic material, I mean real media that is spoken in English, movies in English, TV series, podcasts, you know, um, even books. If I am a beginner, I would probably buy some kids' books in English that have very simple sentences, or those learner series for beginners where there are fewer words for the stories and simpler vocabulary. This is all input. So studying with a grammar book for input, and also consuming authentic material. I will do these two things first for a while, for a few months at least. This is input. You are feeding, let's say, yourself, yeah, with the language before you start thinking about producing it and doing something with it. Okay. Moving on, after spending a few months focusing on the input, I would start producing language. I would start practicing speaking and writing more, let's say, deliberately. Okay. So once I had something to work with, I would start producing. We call it the output. I would produce language both in written form and spoken form. Okay. So I would start creating some sentences, writing down some sentences with some structures I already learned, some vocabulary I already learned, writing some basic phrases there. I would do that. And also reading those aloud to practice speaking those phrases, those sentences. You know, I would also focus on patterns. For example, I like ice cream. Okay, it's quite a basic sentence, but it's a pattern. Yeah. If you change the food here, you can communicate many things with the same pattern. I like ice cream. I like pizza. I like juice. I like coffee. I like salad. You see, this is noticing a pattern and just coming up with other pieces of information as complements, but the structure is the same. This is at a beginner level. What about if you are already at an intermediate level or intermediate advanced? Just focus on more complex structures. Let's pick a conditional sentence here, for example. Listen, if I'd arrived sooner, I would have got the show from the beginning. This is third conditional. It's more advanced as a structure. You see, if I'd arrived sooner, that's a contraction for if I had arrived sooner, I would have got the show from the beginning. So get that pattern and just change the information. So instead of if I'd arrived sooner, I could think of if I'd woken up earlier. Instead of I would have caught the show from the beginning, I could think of something like I wouldn't have been late for the meeting. So you think of other example sentences following the same structure, the same pattern. That's why I really think that you should study grammar with a grammar book, because then you can, like I said, better understand the structures of the language. Okay, so far we have defining uh, a realistic amount of time to practice English every day, something sustainable that you can keep doing for a long time. Then spending the first months at least focusing more on the input, reading, writing, studying some grammar, and also listening to media. Then start producing some language, writing some sentences, speaking those sentences. Okay? Then something else I would do if I had to learn English, nowadays, is I would build topics on top of each other. Guys, I never realized this until recently. I've always been like that, actually. And I really believe that this approach of building topics on top of each other is basically how you learn everything. It's not just English learning. Whatever it is you want to learn, you don't want to forget this. You want to build knowledge on top of knowledge. What I see many times in students is we go over certain topics in classes or in courses, and it seems like the student forgot all the topics that we have already covered, you know? But the idea is you have to bring back those topics and mix them up with the new topic you are, practicing, you know? Let me give you a demonstration here. I'm going to go grab my guitar and I want to show you something. Check it out. Okay, so I have my guitar here, my acoustic, and let me show you something. I know this is going to look like a music lesson for a few minutes, but bear with me because the principle I'm going to show you here can be applied to your English learning and also to anything you want to learn. Okay, and it's always how I've approached learning myself. Okay, so for example, imagine I have here a D major chord. This is a D major chord. All right. But it is possible for me to play the same chord in different regions of the neck. So, for example, this is one shape of the same chord, region one, let's call it. You see? It's the same chord as this one D major, D major, region one. We also have region two, you see? And region three, and region four, and region five. You hear that? It's the same chord, the same notes, but played in different regions of the neck. Aside from the chords, we also have the scales in each region. So, for example, we are looking at D major, right? This is region one, the chord. The scale sounds like, you see? So, we have region two as well. Look, the chord and the scale. And then region three, the chord and the scale. Region four, okay? And then finally, region five, right here, the chord, right? Region five and the scale. Okay. So when I was learning this, what I did first I focused on one region at a time. So first I focused on region one and memorizing the scale, the shape of the scale in this region. Again. Okay. So after I spent a few weeks or even a month only in this region, I moved on to region two and did the same thing. Okay, so I gave myself time to focus only on one region at a time. After doing that, of course, I didn't stop there. I started to mix the regions. For example, I started to mix regions one and two. Look, region one, region two. You see? So I'm playing here regions one and two. And then I started going regions one, two, three. Look, one, two, three, two, one. Got it? And on like that. This is what I mean by building knowledge on top of knowledge. You take a topic and you don't neglect that. You don't forget that. You bring it back and you transform that topic with the new topic you are practicing or learning. That's how you improve. In the case of the instrument here, if I want to do a solo, if I want to be able to play a solo or improvise, I need to know the notes and the scales across the entire neck. And then if I keep building it up, I get to a point where I can do something like this. You see, so I'm able to start here in region 1, go all the way here to region 5 and come back seamlessly. You see? So the principle here is the same for English learning, you know? So if you learn something new, next week when you learn something different, bring back what you learned the week before and build that on top of the new topic, and then mix using them both. For example, if you are practicing connected speech, in my pronunciation course, for example, there are individual lessons focusing on each connected speech pattern. So the idea is first, you study the patterns one at a time, but then the ultimate goal is for you to be able to mix the patterns in the same sentence. Sometimes you have a sentence and you might have 2 or 3 different patterns there of connected speech that you can use. That's what changes your pronunciation. That's what revolutionizes your speaking. About vocabulary, the same principle applies. Maybe you can start with phrasal verbs with take. You spend some time, a few weeks, only focusing on phrasal verbs with take. And then you move on to another category, phrasal verbs with get, you know? But then after spending some time with get, try to mix both phrasal verbs in the same sentence. Write a sentence that has a phrasal verb with take and a phrasal verb with get. Got it? Still talking about vocabulary, let's say idioms. You can categorize or compartmentalize idioms into categories. Like some idioms in English, some expressions are all about animals. They have animals in them. So, you study those first. And then you study idioms that have body parts in them. And then after that, you start mixing them. Try to use one idiom with body parts and one idiom with animals in the same paragraph, in the same monologue that you are practicing. You see? So I've always done that in my life as a learner, and I think this is really useful. It can be applied for language learning, if you're learning an instrument or anything, study topics separately, spend time with each topic. But then after you feel comfortable enough with 2 or 3 topics, start working with them together, start mixing them. This is what I mean by building knowledge on top of knowledge. Something else I would do is I would learn the most common filler words to speak in between sentences. Because, after a while, you get to a point where you know some structures of English already, you know some vocabulary, some phrases. That's great. But if you only speak phrases alone, you're going to sound robotic. So how can you make your speech more conversational? By adding, with taste, of course, some filler words. For example, well, I mean, kinda, sorta. As a matter of fact, I recorded an episode here on the podcast all about this, about filler words. I'm going to leave the link in the card here and also in the description. You can watch it later after watching this episode. Go to that episode because, I teach a lot of filler words there in that episode, okay? Now, something else I would do nowadays, which wasn't possible to be done 20 years ago, was I would get a language learning app to have something on the go. On the go means wherever you are. It's very useful for you to have a language learning app that you can access anywhere you are. Maybe you are waiting in line at the doctor's office for an appointment. You have nothing to do for 5-10 minutes. You can just grab your phone, open up your app, and practice some English there on the go, on demand, let's say. All right. Now, when it comes to language learning apps, I believe that they are not complete solutions. I view apps as complements to your studies. They can be wonderful allies and serve as complements to your studies, but I don't believe that there is an app that is the ultimate solution. Like, it's going to teach you everything you need to know about English to become a fluent speaker. I don't believe there's such an app for that. I think that apps focus on specific things and they can be great complements. So Some apps focus more on speaking and pronunciation, like Elsa Speak, for example. I talk about Elsa all the time here. Elsa is one of the partners of the channel. It's a great app for more pronunciation practice and speaking practice with AI. But other apps also focus on vocabulary building, like Anki, for example. Yeah. And others have more general lessons. Like, they try to teach you more general English. It can be useful, yeah, but again, as complements, like Buzu, for example. So that's the next step. I would get at least one or two language learning apps to use on the go. Probably an app that focuses on pronunciation and speaking, like Elsa, and a vocabulary building app, or an app to practice grammar. Do some grammar exercises. I would do that, but only 1 to 2 apps, not more than that. Something else that I would do nowadays to learn English, to practice my English, which wasn't possible 20 years ago, is AI. Of course, I would use AI models to help me practice my English, like ChatGPT, Gemini. We have a new one now that is more recent called Claude. You can look into it. I've been using Gemini and I've been enjoying it. It's been serving me very well for what I have to do here, for content, for the channel, and everything else, for brainstorming ideas. But you can also use it for learning. All right. I can talk about how to use AI models in more detail in a future episode. But for now, let me just give you some general principles when it comes to using AI models correctly, let's say. You know, First of all, remember that AI models are not online dictionaries only, or they are not designed just for search like Google. You know, a typical mistake I see people making is they treat ChatGPT like a dictionary or like Google. Yeah. Usually when you go to Google, you type in something like best English learning apps 2025, you know, but with AI models, you go beyond that. Okay. These models, ChatGPT, Gemini, they require interaction. You have to interact, to talk, have a conversation with the model. The more you interact with the model, the better responses you will get. It's a back and forth that you need to have with the model. Also, be specific in the things you ask for. The more specific you are, the better responses you get as well. I would also recommend learning a little bit about prompt engineering. Prompt engineering is just a fancy term to refer to the ability of refining your prompt, your instructions that you give to the AI model, yeah, so that you can get the most optimal results. When it comes to that, I would say that there are three main things that you need to keep in mind when using ChatGPT, Gemini for language learning, and for anything that you need the model to help you with, right? First of all, context. Provide the model with the context, what the situation is, your current situation. Then specificity. Be specific in what you ask for. And then interaction. So for example, you can start with context and specificity. Something like this. You can write on the model, I am an intermediate level English learner. I'm learning English as a second language. What kinds of words and expressions do you think I should learn to have a more advanced type of vocabulary? Give me examples. You see, so I'm providing the model with some context, and asking for something very specific. Then the model is going to return something to me. It's going to return an answer. Now, here's the secret. Never settle for the first answer the model gives you. Keep interacting. For example, imagine the model gives me 5 or 6 tips or different topics. I might just focus on one. Maybe there is one topic there that I didn't think about before that I thought it was interesting. I could expand the conversation more about that topic. I could say, I really like the second tip you gave me. Could you elaborate more on that? Could you give me more instructions on how I can apply that tip in my life as a language learner? And then you keep interacting. You see, the more you do that, the better responses you will get. Finally, if possible, if you can afford, I would also recommend getting a premium version of those models. So ChatGPT, I believe there is ChatGPT Pro. Yeah, you pay for it like a subscription, and then you have access to the most advanced model of ChatGPT. Gemini, the same. They have Gemini Advanced. You pay a little bit to Google, and then you have access to the advanced model. Yeah, the advanced version of Gemini. So if you can afford, I recommend getting the premium version of these models because they are, let's say, smarter. Yeah, they can give you even better and more accurate results. Okay. So I would definitely use AI nowadays to help me with my English learning practice and studies. You know, again, just like the language learning apps, I don't believe that AI models necessarily replace courses, teachers, and classes, or even alone study time. But again, they can be powerful complements and allies in this journey. You know, something else I would do, you see, like progressing and progressing. And I guess by now, I would be already at a B1 level, probably, A2 or B1 level, like an intermediate level, pre-intermediate, intermediate. I would also deliberately study with movies and TV series. Deliberately. Remember that watching passively is very different from actively studying with the clip. So you can set aside time to watch passively for fun or just for general input, but I would also set aside time to actually learn from the clip, by pausing the clip, playing it back, taking notes, etc. So watching for studying is very different, looks very different than watching for fun or just for general input. I also have an episode here on the channel and on the podcast about that, where I go in detail on my personal method that I used to improve my English with movies and TV series. I'm also going to leave it here in the card and also in the description of the video for you to watch it later. But do watch that episode. If you have already seen it, watch it again to refresh your memory because, I go over a step-by-step process there that you can take with movies and TV series, how to study with that type of media well. And then there is one final point that I want to cover here. Yeah. Because, by doing all these things that I've already covered today, inevitably, I would get to a point where I would be an intermediate or even upper intermediate level learner, you know? Um, but then there is the thing called intermediate plateau, right? And I believe that most of you, or many of you, are in this position. You are already at B1 or even B2 levels, but you're not exactly sure what to do to move on to more advanced levels, like C1 level, for example. You know, again, I'm going to film an episode dedicated to that, but just to give you a few quick tips here, and this is what I would do. If I reached the intermediate plateau in English or even in a third language, I would do this. I would consume more demanding content. Yeah, so talking about movies and TV series, I would search for maybe movies and TV series that deal with topics that are more serious, more complex, you know? Also, by demanding content, I mean maybe longer podcast episodes about more complex topics. Yeah. TED Talks are great as well, those speeches given by experts. At this point, if I haven't been studying with a teacher yet, I would probably get a teacher if I could afford, get a private teacher or even enroll at a course formally at a school. Yeah. Because I think that for you to move from an upper intermediate level to advanced, you need some guidance. Ideally, you want to have someone like a teacher, to guide you and tell you exactly what you have to do and the topics you have to study to get to advanced, you know? And also to give you feedback, right? Definitely, I will look for more speaking opportunities at this stage. If I were at B1 or B2 level, let's say B1, because, B2, you already speak, right? You already communicate very well. Yeah. If I were like a B1, yeah, then I would intensify the speaking, you know? So I would look for any chance I could get to speak, And nowadays with the internet, I'll probably look for some resources online for this. There are some apps that connect you with other people. You have to check them out, see if you like them. And that's what I would do. Something else I would do to overcome the intermediate plateau is I would prep for and sit a proficiency exam. And for that purpose, Cambridge is my favorite. So after studying for maybe a couple of years, I would probably want to take a B2 level certificate in English or in a foreign language that I'm studying. Yeah. And then after getting that B2 certificate, I would study to get to the C1. And then I would decide if I would want to keep going all the way to C2 or if I will be happy with just a C1. But for me, um, whatever language I learn in the future, my goal is going to be to get to at least a C1 level. You know, I know that for many people, being a B2 level is already great. It's already enough. For me personally, it's not enough. Yeah. I would want to get to C1 eventually. Yeah. C2, not necessarily, but C1 at least, I think that it is the ultimate goal you want to get to as a language learning, you know? So guys, these are the main things I would do if I had to learn English again nowadays from scratch. So just to recap, first of all, I would assess how much time I could realistically spend every day to learn English. I would focus on making it sustainable and focus more on the execution, not necessarily on the strategy. I would start with input, at least for a few months. I would prioritize, let's say, input with a grammar book, doing some reading, some writing, copying things from the book into my notebook, also listening to movies, TV series, podcasts, just to have that exposure already in terms of listening. Then I would start producing language. I could start small with simple, short phrases and patterns and expand as I get more advanced to longer sentences and more complex structures. By changing just the complement, the structure is the same. I would just replace the complement, you know? Also, when it comes to producing language, I would focus on producing language in spoken form, speaking, but also in written form, because I really believe that writing and speaking, they go hand in hand. If you want to be a better speaker, you want to become a better writer as well. The better writer you become, the better speaker or communicator you become as well. I would build topics on top of each other. Yeah. Like I demonstrated with my guitar. Yeah. So you learn a topic first, spend some time with that topic, and then you learn topic two, spend some time with topic two, but then you start mixing topics one and two and using them together. And then you move on to topic three, spend some time with topic three, and then you start mixing everything, topics one, two, and three. This is building knowledge on top of knowledge. I would also learn the most common filler words to speak in between sentences. Those words, those fillers, can help me sound more conversational when I have to speak English with people. I will get a language learning app, one or two language learning apps, maybe one for speaking and pronunciation and another for grammar work or for vocabulary building. I would also use AI models, Gemini, ChatGPT, to help me with that. Remember those tips I gave you on how to use those models? Okay. Of course, I would also deliberately study with movies and TV series, not just watching them passively, but actually selecting a clip and studying with that clip, pausing, playing it back, repeating out loud, you know? And when I reach the intermediate plateau, I would consume more demanding content, check the possibility of getting a teacher or enrolling in a formal course, you know? I would even look for more speaking opportunities, intensify my speaking opportunities, and prepping and sitting a proficiency exam. First at B2 level, and then ultimately at C1 level. So a lot goes into all these things, but generally speaking, these are like 9 things or 9 principles, yeah, that I would follow, I would do if I had to learn English from scratch nowadays. Okay? Here are some final words, guys. Remember, success leaves clues. See what other successful English learners have done and see what works for you. What works, keep it. What doesn't work, toss it. Eliminate it, throw it away. I believe learning a language is a highly personal process, and each person learns differently. Take time to get to know yourself, your strengths and weaknesses, and apply strategies that you deem useful to you. Before we close today's episode, we have the Learner's Corner. For the Learner's Corner today, I actually chose a comment here on YouTube, and I thought that the question was interesting. It's about pronunciation. So this is a comment from Yaroslav. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. That was about the TH sound. So, hello, Thiago. Thank you so much for another awesome episode. I would like to ask you a question. I hope you will find it well and answer me. Okay. How should the voiceless TH and the S sound be connected? Here's an example. I like math so much. I find it hard to switch between sounds. Best wishes from Ukraine. Thank you so much for the comment, for the question, and for the support. I know it's kind of tricky, right? Because what happens is for the TH, the voiceless TH, your tongue sticks out a little bit, right? Like this. You see my tongue, the tip of my tongue is out of my mouth, right? In between my teeth. So I go, now the S sound sounds like s, s. My tongue is not sticking out. It's retracted. It's inside my mouth, behind my teeth. S, s, s. So the challenge here is the switch, right? Your tongue starts here, out for the TH, and then it retracts for the S, like th, th, th. This is the sound, it sounds like a th, th. So your example here, math, so, look, math, so, I connect like math, so, math, so, math, so, math, so, math, so. All right? Math, so, math, so. It's practice, it's training, There are some speaking exercises or let's say articulation exercises that you can try by, let's say, gaining more articulation with your tongue, because this is all about articulating the tongue, right? It needs to be trained to do that, and your mouth as well. Go to YouTube and search for articulation exercises for speech, or speaking articulation exercises, or articulation exercises for better speaking, for better speech. There are some videos of people teaching some exercises that you can do with your mouth, with your tongue to gain more flexibility. But at the end of the day, it's practice, So the sentence here is, I like math so much. That's how I would say it. You see, I like math so much. I like math so much. Math so. You see that? I like math so much, but it's practice. All right. Guys, if you want to leave me a comment, a testimonial, share your story, you can write me an email at hello.teachertiago@gmail.com, or you can also send me an audio message by going to speakpipe.com/English with Thiago. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I hope you find it useful. Happy New Year again. And don't forget to check out my community. Yeah, join my private community. It's a great resource. Also my pronunciation course, to learn more about pronunciation. And of course, subscribe to the channel if you're new here. If this is your first episode watching and listening, subscribe to the channel, follow the show, because, this helps me, let's say, propagate my message to more people. All right. Guys, thank you so much. Great to see you again. And I'm looking forward to talking to you in the next video. I'm Thiago. I'm signing off, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye-bye.